Hello, everyone, and welcome to Petite to Queen's Claim Your Career Crown podcast. I'm your host, Lynn, and today I'm joined by our special guests, Sergei and Vadim Revzin. And today we're going to be talking about how to stand out from the crowd in a competitive field. Now, I am so excited to have both Sergei and Vadim here today. So let's talk a little bit about these twin brothers and co-founders of School 16, an online education company that helps people break into lucrative tech careers without learning how to code. So prior to this, the brothers served as professors and investors at the New York University and its Entrepreneurial Institute. They ran entrepreneurial programs at organizations like Venture for America and were operators at several high-growth technology startups in Boston, New York City, and now in Mexico City. Sergei and Vadim are also writers on Forbes and the Harvard Business Review, where they write about entrepreneurship, venture capital, and the future of adult education. So, Sergei and Vadim, I am so glad to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Lynn. Excited to be here and talk about this really important topic.
All right. And before we get started, because it is a fantastic topic, for those of you who are joining us for that very first time, make sure you don't miss a single episode by subscribing to Claim Your Career Crown wherever you get your podcasts. And if you love what we're doing and you love the show, heart, please leave us that 5-star review. We would very much appreciate it. Okay. So, you guys have such a great background in this whole story. I want to get into this a little bit more and hear about what inspired you to get started and your journey today. So Sergei, Vadim, who wants to take the ball?
Sure, I'll kick it off first, even though Vadim's 20 minutes older than me. Sometimes he lets me start first. So, we are twin brothers and co-founders. Our sort of quick highlight reel story is that we have been excited about entrepreneurship for a long time, since we went to business school undergraduate, where you're surrounded by people who are trying to build companies. And we tried to build our first business in college. It made a couple $100. It wasn't anything big. So we got full-time jobs like our parents wanted us to in finance. But all the while we were thinking about, how do we create the career for ourselves, the career education for ourselves, really learning from other people, so we can build businesses. So we went and we worked for startups. That's how we did it. I worked in sales. Vadim started off in sales as well, but he ended up becoming a product leader and a product manager at several fast-growing startups. We were starting businesses on the side while we were doing this, and some of them, as time went on, they became more and more successful. And we always loved education as an industry. Our father was an education reformer and a school principal back in the former Soviet Union, where we're from. And we ended up becoming professors at a pretty early age, by 30 years old. Vadim became a professor at SUNY Systems and then NYU Tandon School of Engineering. I became a lecturer and a venture investor at the NYU Entrepreneurial Institute. And so we fell in love with education, and we decided our next business was going to be in education, because adult education is changing so quickly, and it's going to continue to change over the next several decades. So that's our kind of quick story of how we got into starting School 16, which we founded in 2020 after working at NYU for a number of years and doing this for other institutions.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a great backstory. And I love what this is going to, because the next question I have, really connected to School 16. And, for those of you who are tuning in, I mean, and you're looking for that next great position or your career change, how do these individuals, how do people go about standing out from the crowd in what can be a very competitive field?
Well, I think the first place to start is recognizing that all of us already have something special, right? We specialize in adult education. There's actually a very specific reason why we decided to pursue this, is because we believe that a lot of us have already, since college, right, whether that's internships or part-time work or whatever it might be, helping out a friend with their podcast idea, whatever it is, many of us have already been doing interesting things. And oftentimes, the first thing you decide to do, right, as your professional endeavor isn't the right thing. It's not something that might be something that creates passion for you, but it is absolutely something that you can and should use to your advantage in terms of the skills that you've developed and whatever that special sort of secret sauce that you have that you can show to the world. And I think when we're young, we think we have to be good at everything, right? I'm not as good at Excel, but I'm really good at, let's say, personal relationships and communication. But now I have to spend all my time figuring out how to be amazing at Excel, right? And as you get older, you realize that there's actually usually one or two things that you're really, really good at. As a matter of fact, better at than most of the population out there. And that is what we realize we want our mission to be, which is helping people figure out what that secret sauce is. So I think when it comes down to helping somebody figure out how do you stand out, it's working through understanding what it is that they already have that they can use to their advantage to separate themselves from the crowd. The best things that they can learn now, right? Sort of whatever the shortcut might be, and there's no such thing as a shortcut, but whatever that sort of next skill they can develop to really stand out from the crowd and kind of expand the way that somebody else might look at them. So it's really taking what you're already good at and then figuring out what is that low-hanging fruit of skills development that I need to really start to separate myself away from the crowd.
Yeah, well, a little bit, it's about that introspection and also then identifying your own superpower. And then how can you use and leverage that? So this is fascinating. So, now you've got me thinking, well, how do you do this? I mean, do you have some kind of specific process that you follow when you work with people? I mean, how do you incorporate that into your curriculum?
So I think one thing that is missing from traditional education, and Vadim and I come from traditional education. We come from a family of immigrants, right? We immigrated to the U.S. when at a young age, and typically those kind of people really believe in the power of education and how important it is to set yourself up for success. But there are some things that are missing from the model, right? The model hasn't really been innovated in a very long time. For most people, when they think about their college experience, they probably can remember one, maybe at most three professors that they had that kind of shifted how they think, that they really loved those classes, and it completely changed how they think about themselves, how they think about industry and jobs. Unfortunately, the majority of our college experience, especially undergraduate, makes us well-rounded individuals, but does not actually prepare us for the reality of the working world, right? When I first got my first job in back office finance and I had to get on a phone call, and that was scary for me. I didn't realize that all of a sudden I'm going to be given all this responsibility, and now all of a sudden I have to figure out how to be good on the phone and convince people to do things, right? Even if it was a relatively simple job back then. And so what we're trying to do that's different in our curriculum is give people an understanding of what is the reality of the different roles that are available out there. Now, we focus on technology jobs. We focus on non-technical technology jobs like sales, marketing, product management, operations, and project management. A lot of the jobs that are really in demand and people want, but they don't really know what they are, right? They read the job description, maybe watch some videos, and that's about it. So we bring in teachers who are not academics, they're practitioners. They're the person at Spotify or Netflix or Google or a startup that has the job that you want in sales or marketing. They can tell you the reality of what it's like. They can show you what it's like. They can help you work on projects that can help you understand, is this for me? And then once you do enough of those projects, we help you focus on an area that we've helped you identify is an area of strength for you. And let's actually add some skills that employers want, so you know how to tell that story to convince people that you should get that job. So that's really the main difference, is how do you give people the context of what the jobs are like? And then how do you empower them by helping them understand how to talk about themselves as a professional, which again, we also don't really learn in college. How do we talk? How do we sell ourselves, right? I'm sure, Lynn, you have a lot of opinions on this. So how do we sell ourselves? Helping themselves sell themselves so they can be confident when talking to companies and decision makers and companies to get the job. So really hyper-focused on helping you sell yourself and understanding what you're good at.
Well, you definitely tapped into something that I am truly very passionate about, because I also know that gap, this huge gap of the practical after getting out of school, all the things they don't teach you. And I truly believe that all the things on that path to leadership roles you learn in sales. You learn those sales skills about adapting to different people and being flexible in how you work with them, about learning to ask for what you need, to really building those relationships, how to follow up, everything you need in sales that you learn in sales, whether you work a day in sales or not, is going to feed your ability to grow as a leader and to step into those higher level roles. And so I love that you're talking about this. And I especially find it so important for diverse communities and for women specifically to take that type of training so they can stand in their own power and really step into those, because it's not just getting the job, but then thriving in the job. And all the time you're doing all those different types of tasks. You're following up, you're working with different types of people. You're needing to sell a project plan or a budget to the CFO, as in that case may be, whatever it happens to be. So this is something that always comes up, though, that I'm curious, that I'd love to have you answer, is why is this concept of standing out from the crowd and being unique and really stepping into your own authentic power, why is it such a challenge for so many individuals?
Well, I think it's because we are never taught this, and we oftentimes don't have the opportunity to hear from the people that have gone through it, what steps they took. If you think about pursuing your career, right? Let's go back 20, 30 years. It used to be that you could mail in your resume or even go physically to the office and say, hey, I'd like to apply for this job. Or you open up a newspaper, you see a job ad. I was just reading about Steve Jobs. His first engineering job was literally, he found it that way. He opened up a job ad, he got a response, and he got the offer same day, basically, or the next day, one interview. Now, obviously, somebody saw potential in him, but the process is a lot more complicated now. And what makes it even more complicated is that people don't talk about it enough. And maybe it's because sometimes folks may feel like, well, this is secret sauce, I shouldn't tell other people my secret or whatever it is. But when we recruit instructors and career coaches and mentors into our program, they want to work with us because they're givers, right? Some people just want to give to other people. They want to help. And I think that when you put yourself out there, sometimes you might feel like, well, I'm reaching out to somebody cold on LinkedIn, let's say. I'm bothering them. They're not going to want to help me. They're more successful. Why would they want to talk to me? But actually, there are humans out there, and actually a lot of people, that once they reach a certain level of success, the only motivating factor for them is giving back. They're not looking for anything else. Well, they might be looking to connect with smart people, somebody younger that can excite them about, their knowledge base or whatever it is, but they're not actually looking for anything else outside of that. They know you don't have a network, right? They know you're just starting off in your career. And I think realizing that there are humans out there that actually do want to uncover that sort of convoluted black box of information and show you exactly what it takes today and want to be helpful. I think knowing and recognizing that can really help somebody spur into action, because it is more complicated now. It is more competitive. It is more democratized because everything's online, but there are ways of doing things to stand out where you truly will start to see those wins. You truly will start to see that you're connecting with people that want to help you, that actually give you introductions directly into opportunities, to where maybe you spent 6 months applying for 100 jobs a week, you didn't see results. And if you just take a slightly different approach, make it more human, you'll start to see that you're actually able to get traction much, much faster.
Right. Well, I love the human to human element, because people do business with people and they hire people. So, and you really touched on something that had resonance again with me. And it was that growth mindset. Instead of thinking that, oh, I'm a nuisance, or they're like, who am I to even reach out to this person? That's a part of that growth mindset work that you have to go through. But I'm curious, what do you find is the typical blind spot that people will have when it comes to standing out from the crowd?
I think a lot of people, and I don't want to make generalizations here, but this is a lot of young people. And I think you mentioned it, Lynn, right? A lot of people who are underrepresented in certain groups who feel like an outsider, right? Historically, still to this day, women represent a much smaller percentage of workforce, and in particular leaders in technology companies. people for underrepresented groups represent a much smaller percentage of people and leaders in technology companies. So you feel that when you feel like an outsider, and when the traditional education system or your community or whatever has kind of beaten it in you to follow the rules, go through the process and get educated, build your credentials before you even talk to anybody, you start to internalize that and realize exactly like you said, like, who am I? And, in particular, right, like we know, right, that men, for example, oftentimes apply to jobs that they're underqualified for because they just feel confident, right? Because society sets you up as a man to just feel confident automatically. That's how you're supposed to act. Versus other people, they may not feel confident and they feel like they have to check the boxes before they allow themselves to expose themselves to rejection, right? And so I think that's the biggest blind spot, is that if you're in sales, like we have been and like you are, Lynn, you already know that it's just about how do you write the right message, how do you approach the right person, and how do you be persistent enough in your follow-up until you get conversations going. And for the rest of the population that's never done sales, and again, sales is not for everyone. We're not trying to convince everybody to become a salesperson, but we're trying to unlock the blind spot. For the rest of the population, it's like, well, if I sent 10 messages and no one replied to me, then I shouldn't be doing this. Then that's a failing recipe, right? Whereas you and I know you got to send 100 messages and then you got to follow up to everybody 5 times at least, right? So I think that's the number one thing, is how do you get out of your own way, right, to stand out by reaching out to people and simply being curious. Let's take, for example, a very specific example. Let's say I'm very interested in project management at a technology company. I've heard that's a cool job. I want to be a manager someday. I want to run projects, and I just don't have the experience. Well, the first thing that I would do is I would make a list of people at the companies that you want to work for on LinkedIn, because that's the way that people in technology connect with each other. Make sure your profile at least talks a little bit about your background so that somebody can, see that you're a professional, or you've done some organizing, or you run some events, or even if it's clubs or whatever you've done. Doesn't have to be professional work experience, but you're somebody that does things. You're a doer. Then once you have that on your profile, which should only take about an hour or two to create, start making a list of people and reaching out to them. And your message can say something very simple. It can say, hi, your profile stood out. I saw you transition into tech. That's something I'm looking to do. And I'm really just trying to learn about what it takes to be a successful project manager. Would you talk to me for 20 minutes just to share some advice? You're not asking for a job. You're not selling anything. You're just putting yourself forward as a smart, ambitious person who wants to get this person's advice. And I guarantee you, if you do this 100 times, you will probably have 10 calls in your calendar within the next couple of weeks. Right? If you're approachable in your message, if you target the right people, and if you're persistent, you will have calls. And all of a sudden, you just grew your network by 10 people who will teach you about the job, will make you more informed, will help you get a foot in the door in organizations, right? Later on, and it can completely open up your world. And imagine if you do this every month. By the end of the year, you'll have 100 people that you know, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, this is basic sales 101. I would add to that you need to approach it with that worthy intent that you genuinely desire, in this case, to learn and to get those special advice and tips. And then you are not going to say, hey, and do you have any job openings, or can you recommend me? You've just met them. All right. But instead, It's that true, that opportunity to create rapport. And so I love the whole way you navigated that. So thank you so much. And, this really brings us to the people who have tuned in and they're thinking like, well, I mean, you just gave them an exact blueprint that they can follow, that they can start today or tomorrow or next week to stand out. But what's another tip or insight that you would say is going to help them do exactly that?
One that comes to mind is a common misconception that we hear from prospective students, or even at the university setting when I used to meet with students for office hours or whatever it is after class. And that is, what you have the freedom to talk about when you're meeting somebody, right? Whether it's a networking opportunity, if you're an entrepreneur, it could be a sales opportunity or a conversation with an investor, or it's a job interview. And the misconception is the following. Most people believe that in order to be an expert or to be able to talk about a particular experience that you have, or even to add it to your resume, you need to have done it full time for at least a year or 6 months, or whatever that number is in your head that makes you feel confident enough to discuss this particular thing. And that is simply not true. And I'll give you a perfect example. We have a friend who is now a successful investor, and he was an entrepreneur before that. Now, of course, there's some advantages there. He had a successful company and he was able to get his foot in the door. But he got really, really interested in blockchain and cryptocurrency right when that stuff started to hit the mainstream about 4 or 5 years ago. Now, someone that might want to learn about it or might want to get a job, let's say a Coinbase or whatever it is, might think, okay, well, I got to figure out if I can get some kind of crypto or whatever it is degree, or get a diploma, or maybe even a certificate online or whatever it is, before someone can take me seriously, right? Or maybe I can get an internship for a company and working for a crypto company and somebody can take me seriously. Well, that's not what he did at all. And what he did helped them skip steps almost immediately in a matter of months. It was very simple, and I bet people that are interested in crypto and the like that are talking to this, that are listening to this podcast, I should say, have already done this. And this is what he did. He found the top 10 podcasts on crypto. He reached out to a couple of people in his network and asked for some papers that he could read about it. And he devoured about 100 hours worth of audio content about the subject. Okay, so there you go. First of all, with that 100 hours investment, he was already more of an expert in that area than 99.9% of the population. The next thing that he did is he was in Boston and he set up a meetup, a cryptocurrency meetup in Boston. Smart contracts, all the stuff that he learned. And he reached out to a couple of folks to sponsor it. Again, he had some of those skills. Obviously, he had that advantage. But because that topic was so exciting for people in the Boston community, he got 100 people to come to the very first event. And guess what happens when you get 100 people to come to an event and you're the organizer? Well, they're not going to look at your resume. They're assuming you're the expert in the room about this topic, even though you've been studying this topic for a whopping 2 months. And so the takeaway there is, if you want to learn a particular skill, or if you want to talk about something that you've done in the past and on your resume, it doesn't mean that you had to have done it for weeks or months or years, right? Or whatever it is, 40 hours a week to have the permission to discuss it, to have the permission to talk about it confidently. Oftentimes, even if you did something part-time as part of your job, like you took on a side project helping out somebody in a different department, or you build a website or a landing page over a weekend, or you helped your friend who has a coffee shop set up their social media and you drove some people into the coffee shop because you listed it correctly, on Google or whatever it is, and all of a sudden it was discoverable. Well, you can put that on your resume. You don't have to wait for permission or a full-time job. You are already the expert. And so that's another common misconception, is people feel like they need to spend years doing something to be able to talk about it. And that's simply not true. If you've put in some effort, if you've learned something, you've already done more than most of the population, and you absolutely do have the permission to talk about it to somebody else.
All right. That is brilliant. I really appreciate that. And I love that whole learning journey, the story. So, as we wrap up here today, Sergei and Vadim, I'd like to ask you if there's anything you wish that I had asked you.
Yeah, sure. Some people ask us why School 16, what's the significance of the name? And we love talking about that story because it's such a personal story for us. We were born in Belarus. We're half Ukrainian, half Belarusian. And our father was an education reformer, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show. And he had a school system in Belarus, and it ended up he had everything stacked against him because he's Jewish, and the communist system did not reward that. But he was just very good at what he did. He was very entrepreneurial in a country where entrepreneurship was illegal. And his education system, where we were lucky enough to go to for 2 grades, ended up being one of the most successful ones in the Soviet Union, where ministers of education would try to send their students. And that school was called School Number 16, Школа номер 16, back in the former Soviet Union. And, we thought of ourselves as eventual educators, but we ended up, coming to the US and wanting to build businesses and getting into technology. And that's how we found our calling in education, in modern iteration of what education looks like. But the reason why I like to tell that story and why we were inspired by our dad's school that he started back in the 80s into starting School 16 now is because I think a big question, especially for young people, is how do you figure out what to do with your life? How do you figure out how to focus what you spend your time learning, what kind of jobs you target, what kind of things you apply to? For us, it was influence from our family to show us what drives us. And also just this process of discovery, of trying to start different businesses, working at different startups until we landed in education, which was kind of our calling all along. But if we tried starting an education business when we were 23, we would have failed. We didn't have the credentials, right? We didn't have the experience teaching at NYU. So I want to mention this just to say that, don't put so much pressure on yourself to figure it out immediately right now, especially if you're in your 20s or even in your 30s. Take the time to do different jobs, to lean into what you're good at, to lean into what you're curious about, and to consume content in the way that Vadim just described so you can become educated, and then start working on projects so you can show that you're a doer. And you will get closer and closer to whatever that is that your calling is, and it will come together eventually. For us, it took, several decades for it to come together, and that's okay. Several failed businesses, some with a little bit of success to show us what we're good at. But ultimately, everybody's timing is a little bit their own. You have to kind of listen to what your intuition is to get there, I think.
And by the way, our dad's school was called Школа номер 16. It's school number 16, kind of like in New York, where all the public schools are numbered. And that's why we decided to name our school School 16. We're trying to do in adult education what he did in K through 12.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. That's a great story. And I absolutely lean into that because I often call myself the poster child of taking a long road to travel a short journey. So, Sergei and Vadim, thank you so much for sharing how to stand out from the crowd in a competitive field. I know that our listeners are going to want to know more about you and how they can connect and find you.
They can, of course, find us on LinkedIn. I'm sure the notes will be there. But school16.co is the website, and on social media, it's all school16co. So we're pretty easy to find.
But LinkedIn, if you listen to the show and there was one takeaway, do connect with people. If you're interested in tech, at least, right? That's what we do. I like, Lynn, how you connected with me right away, before we even got into the show. And here we are now, part of each other's network. And we can, 6 months later, a year later, we can find out about how we can collaborate because we are part of each other's network now, and we have a way to keep track of it on that platform. So if you're listening to the show, add us on LinkedIn, send an introduction message, maybe what you heard that was useful here on this podcast, and then we'll be connected. And if we can help you out, we definitely will. We really believe in the power of, asking for help, but in a way that is relevant and informed, that shows that you understand what that person does and what you want to accomplish. And if you do that, people will be willing to help you. So school16.co, school16co, or Sergei Revzin, Vadim Revzin on LinkedIn.
All right. And we will include all of those backlinks right down below. So Sergei and Vadim are just one click away. And thank you both so much. This has been an incredible discussion, so informative. And for those of you who tuned in, thank you for being with us. If you have any ideas that you'd like to share, please leave us a comment down below. We love hearing your thoughts. Or if you have a specific question or a topic that you would like us to discuss, you can send us an email at jointheconversation@petitequeen.com. And of course, to stay current on all of our insightful advice, our breakthrough advantages, and never miss an episode of Claim Your Career Crown, you can sign up for our weekly Wisdoms newsletter. And I want to thank everyone again who tuned in and for listening. We're so grateful that you're here. And Sergei and Vadim, thank you so much for coming today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Great being here. Thanks for having us.